Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for welcoming me. And this afternoon, I will try to give you the brief from the exchange perspective, from the marketplace perspective, of what's going on in the physical power market, what's going on in terms of market trends, activity, and also behind the screen, what is the, let's say, technology evolution and behavioral evolutions of the trading community that we can observe from an exchange perspective. But quickly, before getting into the core of the topic, just a few words to introduce the company I'm working for those which are not familiar with the name. So EPEX, as an acronym, we'll say it's the European Power Exchange. We're based pretty well everywhere in Europe through the EPEX group as well that we belong to. So you see here a bit all the office where you can meet us or some of our colleagues. So really European by DNA, I would say. We are offering the possibility to value electricity in the physical and the derivative time frame through the EPEX group partnership. So basically, through EPEX and its exchange partners in the EPEX group, you can trade futures power derivative contracts to hedge long-term fluctuations. And then through EPEX you can value your assets through the standard day-ahead auction, which is quite liquid. I would say the standard price today in Europe is matched by EPEX. Further in the time, so closer to delivery time, if you have flexible assets and you want to further follow the, let's say, forecast short-term changes, you can value your flexibility in the intraday markets. And in France, we also have a capacity market where if you have physical assets, you can value also those physical assets in the form of this capacity auction that we are operating all throughout the years. All these possibility for for valuing your flexibility and less flexible electricity assets are done through a single clearing solution, ECC, which basically facilitates as well the process of trading, whether you're trading on the long term or short term. Everything that you trade through the EPEX group and EPEX is cleared through the same ECC venue. So that's the, let's say, value proposal of EPEX, valuing your electricity trading through all the time frame and through simplified clearing processes. Talking quickly about competition, about exchanges. So today, as you have seen, we are operating the Central Western markets and GB. We are planning to extend very soon in the Nordic markets as well, and in Poland and Baltic in the second phase. So Nordic markets expansion, in fact, is scheduled for Q1 next year. So in a couple of months, it will be possible through EPEX to trade power spot electricity from basically the south of France to the north of Finland, so to say, in connection with the rest of Europe, of course, through the different market coupling processes. Enough said about the company. Now I think you understood what we are doing. So we are facilitating power spot trading throughout Europe and soon also in the Nordic markets. But what I wanted to introduce you about was what are the strong trend that we see in these physical spot market that we are operating. First thing, for those which are not so familiar about this, how power is traded in the short term in Europe, the bulk of this electricity for short-term trading is traded through a once-a-day auction that we call the day-ahead auction. So basically once a day, one day before delivery, most of our members are posting their orders for buying and selling, and this is all matched in a blind auction once a day, and we concentrate liquidity at that stage. We're facilitating the exchange of roughly 560 terawatt hour every year through this main auction. So this is really the bulk of physical power trading which is traded there. But we see that these markets have been developing quite well since a decade, but is now considered as a mature market. It's still growing, but at a 5% annual growth rate in average, 5 to 6. That's in the Central Western markets. In the Nordic markets, it's even more mature and even more stable. So we registered half a percentage point of increase of volumes in this market. So basically, that's really where the market is balancing itself, but not where the most of the activity is growing. What is really the hectic part of the power physical trading today? It's on the intraday market. So the intraday market is this marketplace where closer to delivery time, really close to a delivery time, up to 5 minutes to delivery time, you are able to balance your position, either buying or selling electricity. And this, let's say, what used to be a last resort market, where basically the traders were just adjusting marginally their forecast errors, or when they had some power plant stripping, for instance, now has become really a market on its own. And you've seen that the average growth rate of this market is a double-digit one, so it's still 15% average growth rate every year. So a quite exponential increase of trading in that activity. And now what used to be, let's say, marginal market is an 80 terawatt-hour market every year. So every year there is roughly in EPEX spot market 80 terawatt-hour, which are exchanged on this very short time frame, from a couple of hours up to 5 minutes before delivery. So what would explain such a surge of activity? Of course, you have it all on your tongue. It's the increase of renewables. Naturally, with the increase of renewables, you have more volatility in the markets, because these assets are, let's say, interruptible, and they are much more, let's say, sensitive to weather evolutions. So any error in the weather forecast, any evolution in the weather forecast immediately hit the volumes that we see in these intraday markets. And as the renewables assets have been penetrating more and more the power spot market in Europe, this is directly reflected in the intraday time frame. This also explains why we've seen, let's say, an increasing success within this intraday market of trading closer to the delivery and at smaller granularity. You see here on the graph, I would just say the graph on the nice clock on the counter on the left side of the graph, that 25% now in Germany of the electricity traded in that very short time frame intraday is traded based on 15 minutes contracts. So 15 minutes contracts are a contract that we have started listing a couple of years ago, and which allow you to balance your flexible assets on this quarter hourly time frame, so that you're able to more, let's say, precisely shape your needs in rebalancing to the actual physical characteristic of your assets. Of course, you cannot expect your solar plants or your wind farm to react to the weather forecast at hourly basis. So we had to adapt the size of the contract to the actual speed of evolutions of the productions and consumptions patterns of the different assets which are going to be traded on the intraday markets. So that's an important characteristic. So smaller granularity in intraday trading, and also closer to delivery. So we see more and more volumes being traded at the last minute. And this graph basically explains that since 2012, the amount of volumes in the intraday market, this graph is for Germany, but it's applicable for all markets in Europe, the amount of energy that have been traded during the last hour before delivery has increased from roughly 15% to 30% today. And there is no reason to not think that in a couple of years, maybe 50% of the electricity in the intraday time frame will be traded during this last hour before delivery. Why is it so? Because, of course, the more you wait, the more you have information of the actual weather forecast, market information, the more accurate can be your balancing decisions on the intraday market. And that's the reason the exchange and EPEX Spot has accompanied this trend by opening its order book up to delivery time, so to allow all these market participants to integrate as much as possible and bid on the exchange as accurately as possible. So that's three interesting trends: more trading intraday, more trading intraday at a finer granularity, and more trading in intraday close to delivery time. What's interesting also to understand is behind, let's say, one of the reasons, I would say, enabler of these changes in the behavior of intraday trading is also technologic. Because, of course, you can imagine that with such a surge of intraday trading activity, which is done on continuous trading system. So if you go on our booth, EPEX Pod, just there, you will see we have a demo of our intraday platform. So it's a continuous market, orders flowing all time long. So you can imagine that in such continuous market, with an increase of number of orders and trades, with an increase of number of contracts, because now if the standard contract is not the hourly hours but the 50 minutes contracts, it means that we have 96 contracts to trade every day. And with this trading closer to delivery, you need to be very reactive and very fast in monitoring and actually doing your trading. And that's the reason one of the enablers of this surge of activity has been the digitalization of trading. What we have observed is that more and more among our trading community are interacting with our platform through robots, through automated interface. So they are not anymore only trading via the graphical interface and selecting by clicking some orders on the screen, but they are connecting automated engines through an API, so an automatic informatic protocol, directly on the back end of our systems, so that their trading orders are being automated in a flow much faster than what a human could do. There is always also the possibility, and that have been explained in previous presentation, to enhance your, let's say, robots by an algorithm, so that you move from automatic trading to algo-based trading, and you can plug, therefore, and automatize a specific trading strategy in your automated engine. And the surge of this, let's say, automated way of trading has been quite impressive. You see in this graph on the left the number of API connections, so automatic connections, that we are counting on our intraday trading system that we call M7. So now, following this, let's say, big stir, so I would say, I forgot the name, but this incremental change and of API connections, we are about 150 daily connections, automatic connections on our backend system. 150, which is to be, let's say, compared to roughly 250 members that we can count active on our intraday market. So we can say that there is almost a majority of our members now which are using such API connections, automatic connections, to trade on our intraday markets. When you look at the number of orders which are flowing in our system through these automated engines, it's roughly 50%. In fact, it's 40% when you look at the hourly orders of the intraday, hourly contract of the intraday markets. It shifts to 60% for the 15 minutes contract. So as I explained you, these 15 minutes contracts are harder to monitor by human, because we're talking again about 96 contracts to follow continuously all day long. So our, let's say, trading community has found it more practical to automatize more the management of these smaller granularity contracts. That's an impressive trend that we have clearly seen. You've noticed that it's not so dramatic that we have 100% or 90% of our trade being automatized. The reason being that even for, let's say, the most digitalized trading company, they like to keep their graphical interface with an actual human trader to follow up what's going on, what the robot is doing. And this graphical interface is also used as a kind of monitoring tool for what's going on in the market, whether the main trading is being automatized or not. So I think that has been mentioned by the speaker from Next Kraftwerke before. It's not human or robots. It's most of the time robots assisted by human, or the other way around. It depends how you are seeing it. Another important trend in terms of technology or consequence of this automation of trading is the increase we've seen in number of orders that are sent every day on our platform. If there are some traders here from the early days of the power spot market, they might understand the big difference we're talking here. So over a year and a half, we've been seeing the number of orders flowing every day on our trading platform multiplied by 300. And today we're talking about between 800,000 and 1 million orders every day, which are flowing through our intraday trading platform. This might not look very impressive for those which are, let's say, traders on the FX or crude oil business, but I can tell you that for those who know where we started from in terms of intraday trading, this is a small silent revolution, I would say. The beauty of it is that we managed to increase the performance of our trading system so that they can cope with such a flow of activity, which is now becoming the standard. So we consider that an exchange willing to position itself in such intraday market has to dimension its trading systems to this new flow of activity, which is the natural consequence of the automation and digitalization of trading. So those were the, let's say, few insights I wanted to share with you on the trend of intraday trading as the tool to and the reflection of the flexibilization, I would say, of the spot power trading activity. Just a few words to open new perspective of where we are going maybe in the few years in terms of trading flexibility in the market. What we've seen basically is that on the wholesale market dimension, on the country basis or regional basis, the intraday market has revealed and proved itself as a powerful tool indeed to help balancing the grid and help balancing your own balancing perimeter, taking into account the new surge of renewables. But question is whether it is sufficient, this global market, this intraday global market is sufficient to value flexibility and balance these highly flexible assets now we have when we see more and more local congestions increasing in the European market. This is not new for those which are following a bit the, let's say, industry news, but today we have not only cross-border congestions appearing in Europe, but also local congestions being more than visible in some of the countries in Europe. Those local congestions are also due, for most of them, to the increase of or the big imbalance between consumption and production flows within a node. And of course, in those areas where there have been a big increase of renewable investments, renewable production investments, and there is where it is not balanced by sufficient consumption, you see the cost of local congestion and redispatching blowing up. The 1 billion mark in the TENET area in 2017 was reached in terms of redispatching cost. Is that sustainable? On the long term, for the taxpayer perspective, maybe not, or most probably not. And that's the reason why we think that it's important to complement the global intraday market or the regional intraday market by local flexibility markets, which concept would be quite simple, in fact. It will be to complement this nice intraday market that we have with local order books that will allow buyer and seller of flexibility to exchange on a market-based perspective those flexible assets and help relieving those local congestion that we are seeing appearing more and more in Europe. So the suppliers of this flexibility means will be any manager of a flexible asset, being an aggregator, a power plant, storage owner, who will then sell the flexibility assets or the flexibility enability to system operators which are today suffering local congestions issues and which are not able to manage these local congestion issue on the intraday markets because those congestions are really local. They are not on a regional basis or on a national basis. We are operating such flexibility marketplace at EPEX. We've launched, in fact, a demonstrator in the northwest of Germany called Enera. And we are striving to prove that operating local flexibility platform in parallel of the booming intraday marketplace that I've presented to you is a concept that will fly in terms of social welfare, in terms of feasibility, technical feasibility, because we will be using the same technology for intraday trading, but then authorizing trading on a nodal basis. And we think that's one possible future of the evolution of power trading, going more and more local in parallel to the intraday market managed at regional level. I will stop here with the concepts. If you have some questions, I'm available now during the panel or afterwards. Meet us at our booth if you wish to get more details about all these initiatives. Thank you.
So thanks very much, David. Thank you. I'm now beginning to understand why in my old back office I was seeing volumes go up to the degree that I was, in terms of, not in terms of megawatts, but in terms of numbers of trades. And they've, in the 2 years that I've been away, they've gone up a lot more. I hear that from the guys that are there now, and I now see and believe it. So very, very interesting. And I'm also, once again, humans, you mentioned, they're there just keeping an eye on what's going on and ready to, well, I assumed ready to step in if things are not behaving as they should. Great stuff. So, do we have any questions for David? We've not got much time, but no? Okay, thanks so much.